Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed since last time. American friar blames the victims in clergy sex abuse cases. If you ever watched much EWTN, you probably know who that guy is, Father Benedict Groeschel. About 2 weeks ago, Groeschel was interviewed by the National Catholic Register, and when the subject turned to the clergy sex abuse scandal, he had this to say, quote, "People have this picture in their minds of a person planning to, a psychopath, but that's not the case. Suppose you have a man having a nervous breakdown and a youngster comes after him. A lot of the cases, the youngster, 14, 16, 18, is the seducer." Groeschel has since apologized, and the Catholic Register has removed that interview from its website. Defending child molesters, then expressing regret while the evidence is removed. You think Groeschel is running for Pope? Old Clint Eastwood. Let me start by saying this. Clint Eastwood can say or do whatever the fuck he wants. He's the man with no name. He's Josie Wales. He's William Money. He's Dirty Harry, for fuck's sake. He's one of the greatest actors and directors in the history of American cinema. And as for that speech that he gave at the GOP convention, yeah, it was odd, it was awkward, it was aimless, he stammered a bit. But the implied F-bombs that his invisible Obama was dropping all over the place certainly made for something a lot more interesting than the typical droning convention speech. And as my stuffed dog pointed out in a previous video on this channel, I couldn't help but notice that Clint didn't really seem all that excited about Mitt Romney. But my favorite part of the speech was when Clint said, "Hey, we own this country," and the "Take Our Country Back" crowd that was there kind of exploded into exuberant applause and cheers. And then they fell back into a baffled silence a moment later when Clint made it clear that by "we" he was referring to all Americans and not any particular group. You know, now that I think back on it, that speech wasn't really that stupid at all. It was one enraged, Dirty Harry-esque outburst from being pretty awesome, actually. Chuck Norris's apocalyptic anti-Obama ad. Last weekend, Chuck Norris released a political ad featuring himself and his wife, which, among other things, said this:
"Our great country and freedom are under attack. We're at a tipping point, and quite possibly our country as we know it may be lost forever if we don't change the course our country is headed.
We will preserve for our children this last best hope for man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the first step into 1,000 years of darkness."
Calm down, okay, Walker? The tone of this entire ad is so dire that it becomes absurd. Not as sublimely absurd as those rockets Chuck launched out of the ass end of his motorcycle in Delta Force, but pretty close. Maryland State Delegate attacks football player over same-sex marriage. And in local news, Emmett C. Burns Jr., a member of the House of Delegates here in my home state of Maryland and a rabid opponent of same-sex marriage, has written a letter to the owner of the Baltimore Ravens to complain that a Ravens player, linebacker Brendan Ayanbadejo, has publicly endorsed same-sex marriage. Burns's letter reads in part, quote, "I find it inconceivable that one of your players would publicly endorse same-sex marriage. Many of my constituents and your football supporters are appalled and aghast. I am requesting that you take the necessary action as a National Football League owner to inhibit such expressions from your employees and that he be ordered to cease and desist such injurious actions. I know of no other NFL player who has done what Mr. Ayanbadejo is doing." So that Tim Tebow anti-abortion Super Bowl ad, that never happened. The San Francisco 49ers recording a video for the It Gets Better project, I just dreamed that. Why am I dreaming about the San Francisco 49ers? Anyway, look, the point is, football players are not soldiers. They're not members of a religious order. They've taken no vows of silence. They can express their opinions on political and social issues if they want to. Personally, I applaud Brendan Ayanbadejo for speaking out positively on an important issue that is especially relevant this year because it's on the ballot in the state where he plays his home games. The stupidest part of this whole thing is that Ayan Badejo's endorsement of same-sex marriage was first made public on October 21st of last year, which means that Emmett C. Burns Jr. is not just a bigoted jackass, but a bigoted jackass who needs to start paying attention. Democrats puss out on platform. Last week at its convention, the Democratic Party voted to approve a platform that explicitly endorsed same-sex marriage rights. That was the first time that a modern American major political party had ever done that. And it's great news. It's a huge symbolic step forward, something that we should be celebrating. But I can't help but be a little disappointed in another first that we just barely missed out on getting. That would have been the first truly secular major modern American political party platform. And the reason we missed out on it, apparently, is because of Barack Obama, who noticed that a reference to, quote, God-given potential that had been present in the 2008 platform had been deleted and asked that it be reinserted. And reinserted it was following a controversial floor vote where it sounded like the ayes might not quite have had it, despite the declaration of such by Chairman Antonio Villaraigosa. Many of those on hand booed the possibly bogus result, which prompted Fox News to report that Democrats were booing God at their convention. They weren't booing God, they were booing the crooked, crude, unfair method by which a reference to God had been wedged back into their party's platform. But you know what? Even if they were booing God, what would be so wrong about that? Have you read this book? Why wouldn't you boo this vicious old cocksucker? The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.